Um, I had a difficult transition out of the military. It was all I ever wanted to do. I mean, my career was in my degree rather was in peace, war, and defense. Because military history and political science is a great degree if you want to go and be a career army officer. But when that door closes, it can really send you on a spiral of what now. And so what really kind of turned things around for me has been getting out and doing community service. And so about 5 years ago, I ran across an organization called The Mission Continues. And what they do is get veterans and civilians to join forces in the community and build and beautify, especially at places like nonprofits that could use the help and really we bring to bear certain skill sets, certain level of discipline, and certain flexibility to adapt and overcome and fabricate things that other organizations really just don't have the ability to do. So once I saw the potential for that, I decided that I wanted to join and do their fellowship program and become a service platoon leader after that. And so, as a service platoon leader, I was able to do 38 service projects in my community, bringing together hundreds of veterans and civilians. And really, that's made the biggest impact in my life. I mean, yeah, athletics, great, getting in shape, great, mental, physical health, it's foundational. But the impact that service therapy has really brought me is irreplaceable.
Yeah, so how did you find the mission continues?
It's funny. I was originally very interested in Team Rubicon. And this is right when they first started up. Nobody really heard of them, but I was noticing that they were really kicking butt in the community and abroad. And that was my goal. Okay, let me get my house in order, both literally and metaphorically, and get healthy enough and get on my feet enough to volunteer with Team Rubicon and respond to these disasters like I did after post Katrina New Orleans. But going abroad and exposing yourself to a lot of environmental hazards with a prosthetic is not the best course of action necessarily. So when I saw the opportunity to do something similar with one of their kind of sister organizations, because you can think of Team Rubicon, the Mission Continues, and Team RWB, Red, White, and Blue, as kind of trifecta sister organizations. RWB being the kind of running and athletic component of veteran service organizations. But um, really it was just this desire to get back into the community and to be a selfless servant again, to live my values. They uh, brainwashed us, for lack of better words, with these beautiful Army values. Um, Last on the list, but certainly not last, is selfless service. And so, we've got these values, and how do you express them as a kind of aspect of your identity post service? Well, you continue to serve, whether it be with a nonprofit or whether it be as an individual. You just find ways to take your mind off yourself and kind of put your energy into the community at large.
No, that's awesome, and brainwash is a good term. Because they definitely ingrain and instill those values into
It's on
people.
the stairs,
Yeah,
everywhere.
because you got to have those visual reminders of it. But you bring up a good point. Is you had that foundational instillment of values, right? So, what have you found now that you transitioned? You retired from the military medically. You transitioned into the civilian world. You were looking from what I heard, you correct me if I'm wrong, I heard you were looking for that same camaraderie and friendship
Right.
that you felt while you were in, but you still wanted to give something back bigger than yourself. So what do you see now, since you said you've led 38 different local events? What do
Yeah.
you find now when it comes to recruiting and leading those events?
Right now, I'm taking a step back for family, and basically, there's a season to be gung ho and accomplish 38 service projects in a year and a half, and then there's a season to take a step back and say, get a little bit of new blood in, rebuild, and then come back at it. So that's kind of the point I'm at now. Typically, with platoon leaders that have given it their all and taken a step aside, you don't really see them come out as much. But I've tried to flip that on its head and come out to pretty much every service project since having a new platoon leader step up. But it's been a good run. I feel like I had a foundational kind of. I think I was foundational in the growth of the Mission Continues Orlando in terms of just showing the potential, what we can achieve when you get veterans and civilians working together in the community with Disney's money. Thank you, Disney. And you know, there's let's see, there's I want to say 80 service platoons around the country. Um, Orlando has two. There's like, for example, five in Houston, all the way up to Hawaii.
Well, I didn't know. Actually, when I first heard about this group, I really found out about it through you and your Facebook posts and all the awesome things that you were doing. So, like, what are some of the community service oriented projects that you led as platoon leader?
They've all oriented around youth. For first platoon in Orlando, our focus is youth. Second platoon is hunger. So they have a partnership with the food bank, and we have a partnership with um, different nonprofits in the local community that facilitate youth success. So we're kind of like we don't do anything. We just kind of make the nonprofits that are successful better and more beautiful. So, for example, we were able to, in conjunction with the food bank, create what's called mobile market units, which is, if you can imagine, two bookshelves on wheels that kind of have a hinge in the middle, come together, kind of like Scholastic Book Fair back in the day. They'd roll the bookshelves in,
Yep.
but to get them through the door, you'd have to open them up. Well, the reason those came into play is because after Hurricane Maria devastated the island of Puerto Rico, that's basically when I took over 2 years ago. And being a native, Floridian and living here for so long, it's okay. Obviously, we're going to have a huge influx of um, Puerto Rican evacuees coming from the islands, coming to stay in Orlando, which has a huge Puerto Rican population as it is. So my request to the mission continues off the bat was, what can we do to focus on this issue, focus on this population, and make a significant impact? And they said, hey, look, Bobby Withers, go at it. We fully support you. We got your back. The mobile market units are a design we fabricated working with the food bank to roll into the classrooms with the highest influx of Puerto Rican evacuee youth and bring food, directly from the food bank to them. It kind of morphed into a program where the food bank wanted more mobile market units, and so we've built over a dozen now. But they fill them up with food, roll it out to where the kids are leaving at the end of the day, and they're giving them reusable bags, filling them up with whatever food to bring home if need be. Because especially after school during the summer weekends, a lot of these kids are dealing with food insecurity, and nutrition is foundational to everything. Anything you want to do, you do worse when you're hungry, right?
Yep.
Including homework, including schoolwork, and including just everything. So making sure that these kids have enough nutrition is foundational. And what happened when you had a huge influx of evacuee youth into these schools was they were taking the classrooms that they had converted into pantries and converting them back into classrooms. So they had more mouths to feed and lost the capacity to do that. So it was kind of a band-aid as a bridge. But it was something that, you could get a couple dozen veterans, some civilians together and do on the weekends, because it's good for the kids, it's good for the nonprofit, it's good for the veterans, and civilians have a lot of fun too. But more importantly, get the veterans out of the four walls, because isolation and withdrawal are foundational to the aftermath of trauma. And for me, that was my main catalyst is, let me get out of the house. I don't want to meet people at the bar. I want to meet people more, like-minded.
No, that
Nothing against drinkers. Watching.
no. That's amazing. And also, Brandon, he texted, "Thank you for what you do," and he goes, "Wish more people would see these videos." So, you bring up a really, really good point, because recently, part of the organization I'm in now, they had to deal with, humanitarian aid, humanitarian assistance, stuff like that, and so, the idea of taking the Scholastic book thing and turning that, fabricating it, and then turning it into something that you could use as to a food bank to feed kids at school, that's an amazing idea, to even come up with that, and then for people to buy into it and say, yeah, this is awesome. So when you had the evacuees come in for Hurricane Maria, and you were like, hey, we need to feed the kids, we need to get them the food.
Yeah.
So
10,000 plus families registered, and not through us, but in general, in terms of how many evacuees came through Orlando Airport, counted 10,000 families. Just to give some context to how much of a humanitarian crisis it was becoming. Still is.
yeah, and so what is the organization doing? Mission Continues still doing active stuff with the evacuees who just haven't returned back yet, or
You know, we've made some really good connections and have some great partnerships with, for example, Hispanic Federation, and they're they've got two offices, one in Orlando, one in New York, but the Lin-Manuel Hamilton, his son runs it, and they do fantastic work. So we've been really able to use them as an avenue, and they were the ones that gave us a lot of our ideas and support for our big Veterans Day project, last year actually. And we were able to bring out over 100 veterans and civilian volunteers to build 250 pieces of furniture, refurbish over 50 bicycles, 100 plus welcome home kits, and a lot more. Because these folks that got on a plane, they didn't bring furniture with them, they didn't bring bikes with them. So if you're on foot, your possibilities are within a diameter of 5 miles. If you're on a bike, your possibilities are within a diameter of 50 miles. So it changes your possibilities. If you've got a dining room table to feed your kids at and a school desk for them to do their homework, it returns that sense of normalcy and that dignity that you want your family to have. Even if you're facing a crisis, that's the kind of America I want to live in, is one that welcomes its arms to those in need.
no, you're right, man. And over the course of the years, that's what we do as a nation. We come together, we band together, we help people that are in need. And it's the Hurricane Maria crisis and the need that it brought with it. Especially when people have nothing and they show up and they're looking for help. You hit it on the head. Like, who would have thought, like, hey, let's get them a table, let's get them some chairs, let's get them some furniture.
Yeah.
You forget about those things because you take them for granted because they're normal, commonplace, everyday things that you have. But then when you no longer have it,
Yeah.
it becomes incredibly critical. So, organizations that you belong to who come up with these, ideas that I don't know, to be honest with you, how many people think of those things like, hey, let's refurbish furniture, the bicycles. I was going to ask you
Yeah.
about it because we have it, the pictures playing in a loop and you're standing there in front of all those bicycles. I was going to ask you, what all that was about, but you hit that. So, um,
Yeah. And it honestly it comes down to asking the right people the right questions. And so I went and I found out who's doing the most legitimate good in the Puerto Rican community in Orlando. And I asked them, what do you need 1 year out? What's the boots on the ground? What's it look like for evacuees 1 year out? And they said they're getting displaced from their temporary housing situations with no alternative housing situations, which means they're going from having hotel vouchers to having no hotel vouchers and no other options. So they're in the process of finding um, stable living conditions, but they don't have anything once they get there. So that's asking the right people the right questions is kind of how we came about that, because it's like, what can a few dozen veterans get together and build? Okay, now what can 100+ veterans and civilian volunteers get together and build? And where are they all going to stay? And what are they going to eat? And what's transportation going to be like? So basically, it turned into a regional service project, like they would have, hundreds of people come together for and spend months coordinating. Came together in about 2 months with myself and a handful of others working their tails off. But it really came down to an initial check given to me by us, rather, by Governor, now Senator Rick Scott of Florida, by the Westgate resort folks, just to give support. And as soon as myself and second platoon leader, hard charger Marine Yuritsa Perez got that check, we looked at each other and we were like, Puerto Rican support, no question, too easy. And it just came down to, how are we going to turn Disney's money, Westgate's money, all these different folks that want to support us, how are we going to turn that into something? And it really, it all came together, but it still blows my mind that all the pieces fell in the way they did.
So what do you think your biggest leadership challenge was? Because it sounds like you had the right finances fall in place, the right resources fall in place. You had a workforce that was wanting to, a veteran workforce who was like, hey, let me get out of my room, let me get out of my house, let me go do something. Even if some of them were like, yo, dude, I'm going to drag your butt out of the house. I'm going to take you here so you can do something. What was your biggest leadership challenge?
You know, it's been interesting to lead a veteran serving organization slash community service organization at the same time in the age of divisive politics and tribalism. Um, for example, when I was posting about the Veterans Day Service Project, hey, come out and serve these Puerto Rican evacuees. I did get a message, hey, why are we serving these Puerto Ricans? They're not even Americans. We should be taking care of the North Carolinians that got hit by the hurricane after that. And so it was difficult to stay apolitical, difficult to bring all the different tribes and tribal folks together for a common cause. Now, once we all got together, just a bunch of veterans hanging out, doing what we do, um, shoot, shooting the breeze, and figuring out ways to adapt and overcome and accomplish the mission, um, without really getting into the kind of divisive issues. But it was still very difficult to kind of toe that line between wanting to bring out the activist minded without bringing out the radically minded.
Yeah. So with that, did you? How did you handle when you said the political aspect of it? Because anything having
Yeah.
to do with money and people groups and natural disasters, that is never a good political situation. So how did you navigate and steer people away from, hey, don't worry about these issues over here. We need to focus on helping people be people, and that's what we do. How did you focus on that and turn it around? Because no matter, I don't care who you are, if you're a person, you have a
Yeah.
bias. And so, how do you get people to turn off those biases? Because it's not like a normal organization where people are getting paid to show up. They're volunteering their time, their energy to come volunteer.
Exactly.
So, how do you take that? You tread those waters and you get them to produce.
Well, it comes back to kind of going back to my original foundational kind of mantra of alleviate suffering. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what I'm doing, but I do know that if I can alleviate suffering, that's a good thing. If that's the end state, less suffering, I think people will follow that. And so that was my kind of mentality of show that the end state, no matter if it's left or right of center, is going to alleviate suffering, is going to bring positive change, regardless of the demographics of who it's bringing positive change for. If you can tell that it's a legitimate cause and a legitimate effort that's going to have real world success, people will come out. People put their biases aside to join a cause that's bigger than themselves, um, and alleviate a little bit of suffering from others' lives because they might not say it, but they might be suffering themselves.
So talk about that a little bit. So I mean, you mentioned that helping other people and serving your community will help alleviate your own suffering. So I know some people will be like, well, that's like saying the more you work out, the more energy you get, but I get more tired when I work out, right? So,
Yeah.
how do you translate that from people's personal suffering and giving back to the community and getting fulfillment out of that?
More than anything, it's about finding what cause speaks to you, what group is making the biggest impact on that cause, and what's the best thing you can do for that group at this time in this season of your life. Because this might not be the season of service for you. This might be a season of rebuilding your own personal, professional circumstances to build up to that season of um, getting back into your community, finding that nonprofit, even if it's going on, volunteermatch.org or .com. Don't quote me on that. And typing in the little algorithm search bar what interests you, and letting it kind of send you in those directions. But it's important to get yourself squared away and then figure out what calls to you. For me, I have two kids, and supporting youth in my community is it's kind of a no brainer for me. But for other folks, everybody's kind of got something that is their topic du jour.
No, that's awesome. So how does, let's say, personally for you, how has serving, helped you?
It's given me a renewed sense of purpose and tied me back into the community. The that we're talking on 9/11 about military, first responders. Difference between the military and first responders that get injured. Typically, first responders settle back in the community that they're already serving in. So, in a lot of ways, they have an easier aspect than your typical combat wounded or, otherwise disabled veteran that may be transitioning back into a community that's closer to home or closer to different job opportunities, not necessarily, back to the community that they were serving in. So, for myself, for example, where I chose to live is kind of great for my children custody situation, but I didn't know a lot of people, and when you go out and start mixing it up with the locals, sometimes you get led in a negative direction. But to be able to reconnect and have that camaraderie again, have a positive reason to wake up early on a Saturday morning. Hey, I can't go out drinking on a Friday night. I got to wake up early Saturday. I can't go out drinking on Saturday night. I'm
Yep.
exhausted from service project earlier. So it naturally has a way of getting you out of your shell, making you rethink like, okay, I'm with these other veterans, and this is how they're coping positively and healthy. Um, Coping mechanisms. Maybe I can replicate some of what they're doing. Because, a group of veterans that like to volunteer, there are groups of really cool people out there in the world, but groups of veterans that like to volunteer is they're that's my group right there. You know what I mean? If you had to put me in a room of folks for the day, that's who I want to spend it with. And because we have as much fun as we have success, and um, it's important to have that camaraderie and kind of have folks that are on the same level as you, because it can feel like when you talk to civilians sometimes you're not speaking the same language, and even if you are, it's not being quite understood the same way. The gallows humor is different, the acronyms are all different, and the experience is different. You don't make friends like you do at war. That's pretty much
Uh,
the pinnacle of bonding. So that camaraderie, it doesn't really, that need doesn't lessen over time.
no, you're absolutely right. For a lot of people who haven't served, they don't know the differences and the camaraderie. So when we talked about the camaraderie and we've talked about their volunteers, so what are two ways that people can reach out to the mission continues if they want to volunteer? It's like how did you get started, and then how did you move up
Yeah.
into a leadership position?
Well, it depends on where they live, but more than likely there's a local service platoon. If they're by a major city, check out the Mission Continues .com on the website, and just look for their local service platoon. That's the primary way. The secondary way would be maybe coming out to one of the regional events, or like a week-long muster, because that's another cool thing is getting a couple hundred veterans together and tackling a significant community problem. Kind of like there's a picture that says this is not a dump. In Baltimore, we turned what had definitely been a dump into a community garden, with the help of literally hundreds of volunteers, um, slanging some truly heinous stuff out of that dump. But when you get veterans on a mission, just point them in the right direction and get out of their way. And that was basically, the theme of the day. We knocked it out and transformed the community. Having them come out to say thank you and come out and want to take part was phenomenal.
Yeah. So you think, you know, are there non-veterans who come out to the
Oh
mission
yeah.
continues and volunteers, or is it just strictly veterans?
Yeah, they're typically veteran led, but the blend is about 50-50 in terms of your average service platoon. Your average service project, about 50-50 blend of veterans and civilians, and kind of atypical statistically for the military, we have about 40% female engagement, female veterans um, coming out. So, you know, obviously volunteering and a lot of the stuff we do require a certain level of empathy and compassion. And so, you know, obviously we attract a larger demographic of women who feel like they can get together and talk about shared experiences in the military, whether they be good, bad, traumatic, or otherwise, and feel like they have an organization that they can trust to go to. And so for me, being the father of two daughters, I want to have a legacy that my daughters can be proud of. And so, you know, that was really another major catalyst in serving with the mission continues.
That's a really awesome point where you talked about legacy. So, um, you know, a lot of people, I don't, you know, they go through life on a day to day basis. They get caught up in all the minutia of the day, day in, day out. Um, you know, so when you meet people, do they are they there just because they just want to be there, they want to give back? Because I know for you, you want to set a good role model for your kids. How often do you see that, you know, when for the people who come out as well?
I see it frequently. A lot of folks bring their kids out. I try to make them as youth friendly as possible, considering that we have power tools a lot of the times and whatnot. But as youth friendly as possible because it's important that families, especially young children, get to see their mom or dad, especially in a different role. They see them, you know, in the household, stressed out, to do list, bills and groceries, yada, yada, but they don't get to see the side of them that might be their parents' favorite side, the giving back side, the joking with their comrade side, the busting a sweat for a good side, for a good cause side that they don't get to see on a day-to-day basis with their stressed out parent, but they get to see them do that at a service project. It's good to see that different side of them.
No, absolutely. So, what would you say is the most challenging thing you've encountered since you started volunteering?
Personally, you know, dealing with my own issues with PTSD, like I said, isolation and withdrawal. You know, you can get overwhelmed with phone calls and emails and meetings, and you know, I'm retired for a handful of very good reasons, and so there was a lot to overcome in terms of just refusing to check out. There were a few times I had to check out for a few days, but by and large, refusing to just get overwhelmed and say, I can't handle this, because I put about as much on my plate as any one person I think could handle, and including giving my card out to as many veterans going through veteran treatment court as I possibly could. You got veterans that have been picked up by law enforcement for usually nonviolent drug offenses, self medicating with one thing or another for one reason or another, and get tied up in the criminal justice system. So I was going in, business or you know, card in hand. I'd ask them, how many hours do you have, and when do you need them done by? And then I'd write that down on the card and give it to them because I knew they wouldn't throw that information away once I wrote it down. But I would bring them out to service projects because they needed those community service hours, and the court was allowing me to give them 2-for-1 hours, including travel.
Oh wow, that's significant.
It is. So if you imagine they come out, they spend a half hour driving there, spend 4 hours at the project, half hour driving back. That's 5 hours times two is 10. So that veteran just got 10 hours of community service to hang out with other veterans, learn about resources, bunch of positive influences, all wins. Except for my phone was blowing up off the hook with veterans and treatment programs for drug addictions. Now, I took that burden full steam ahead, and it's probably one of the aspects of my leadership service time that I'm most proud of. But it could be difficult getting what phone number is this? Phone calls at 10 or 11 o'clock at night because somebody's freaking out about their upcoming community service is due, and they heard about this guy out here giving 2-for-1 hours doing kick-ass have fun community service projects. So biggest challenge is not to toot my own horn, but being a victim of my own success. You have to kind of temper your intentions and try not to be too gung-ho for your own capacity to return voicemails, for example.
No, that is a huge point to make because your time is your time, and so if you're volunteering it out there, and you say, hey, if you need help, you need support, I'm here for you, and then people call you on it, and then it's something they want, it's something they need, and like you said, it's all wins. That aspect transcends, I think, across all aspects of life, no matter what type of leadership position you're in, because you have to be able to balance, your work life and your home life. I mean, like I know you got two kids, so I know they take up a lot of your time, which is they should because they're important. But
Well, they started out part time. I had my youngest daughter for all of first grade, about halfway into a year and a half of leadership. I got a phone call soon after starting, and my ex said, "Hey, look, I'm deploying. Um, the new husband's off at training. I'm deploying to Jordan for a year. Can you take this 6-year-old bundle of joy for all of first grade, on top of all of these service projects and on top of training for a marathon?" So, the biggest challenge is really just prioritizing, finding ways to blow off steam because, when you've got like 3 plates and they're all full, you can start dropping stuff, and if you've got high standards, you might not want to drop a thing, and it's just you can only go down that path for so long before something's got to give.
So how did you manage that? So how did because time management for a lot of people is probably not a good strong suit. So how did you manage, an all of a sudden uptick in, your service of what people are doing, what people are demanding from you? How did you manage that?
I had to get organized. I was organized before, but I had to get a different level of organized. So using the iPhone and MacBook, whatnot, shared notes, shared calendars, um, email chains, apps, whatever can facilitate communication and that communication process that helps take a project from idea to after action review. Whatever can help facilitate organization and communication, was something that I latched on to and tried to facilitate and exploit. But more than anything, keeping notes, keeping a to-do list, not only a to-do list, but a to-do list that's broken down by wake up, next, by the hour sometimes, by the event. But really, it's about prioritizing, what you want to accomplish, being able to remember, the things you prioritize. And so, from my understanding, if you make a to-do list and even throw it away, Just write it down, bring it into the real world out of your imagination. You're 80% more likely to accomplish it. Even if you throw it away, you're 60% more likely to accomplish it. Just bringing the anxiety producing thoughts of what you need to accomplish out of your mind into the real world makes them something that has to be tackled. Whereas if you keep them in your mind wants to insulate itself from these stressors causing you anxiety, so it keeps them on the back burner. But that's not where you accomplish things. You accomplish them when you put them on the fire of a dedicated, prioritized to-do list.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I literally have 3 books that I write in like every single day, and it literally hour by hour, minute by minute. Hey, here's my top 3 that I have to get done today. So because it took me a while to get to that point. To realize, how important prioritizing your time was, and not necessarily just prioritizing your time, but prioritizing what's important. So how did you come up to determine, okay, this is actually important and this is what I need to focus
Yeah.
on? Because it sounds like you're in a large range of things that you're doing and contributing to. So how did you determine and narrow down, okay, this is no kidding important and this is what I need to focus on?
Yeah. A lot of it is just prioritizing your main goals, and sometimes you have to reprioritize. For example, I was pioneering paraskeleton. For the viewers and listeners that aren't familiar with paraskeleton, it's basically one man bobsled, and you go down on your chin. You go down face first on your chest, and there's no such thing as Paralympic skeleton, which is why myself and a handful of others pioneering it. So for about 2 years, twice a year, going up to the Olympic Training Center, and slide after slide after slide, risking my life every time, going 60, 70 face first down the ice. Um, there came a time where I said, "This is fun. This has Paralympic potential, but how much potential versus how much risk, and is this prioritizing and focusing on this? Is this going to get my ultimate goal of making my family proud, making my community proud, returning that sense of pride and purpose to myself?" And really, it wasn't there for me. So I had to, take that big. It was an ego boost for sure, but it was sugar. There was no real substance to it. So I had to refocus and realign on family, service, and being the best father and veteran I can be. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. When I saw you doing the skeleton stuff, I was like, Bobby, what are you doing, man? You are nuts. But it looked really cool, and I was excited for you that you were doing that. But I don't know if you read the book by Simon Sinek, and he said finding your why or what's your why. So it sounds like you're doing
Yeah.
exactly what he said. Is you had to repurpose and recenter yourself of what is it that I'm doing, why am I doing it, and I think you found it, and you're doing an amazing job. I'm incredibly impressed by all the things that I've seen you accomplish over the years, and and you have fun doing it, man. So that's amazing. Not a lot of people I can meet say they really enjoy what they're doing, and you look like you're really enjoying what you're doing, and you sound like you enjoy what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. You got to turn negatives into positives, and I basically turned one of the biggest negatives of my life into the kind of positive that was able to give me the life I've always wanted, which is um, a lot less stress and a lot more ability to serve in the community, and make a real difference. So this is I mean, well, I'm on the road to living the dream. Not gonna lie.
You look like you're living the dream, man. And so I am going to ask you one more question. And actually, Jamie said it was an honor to listen to you, a veteran, speak about volunteer aspects that have impacted lives of many. So thank you for what you have done and continue to do what you do. Um,
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
so
Thank you for your support.
I do want to ask you one question, and it may sound like a weird question, but I think it's incredibly important. So,
Cool.
and I know we didn't talk about it earlier, so I'm going to throw you for a curveball. So, I think, success is great, but
Yeah.
we learn and we grow from failures. So, on a leadership aspect, what is one
Hmm.
thing that you took on and it like you were like, you know what, this is going to be so awesome, it's going to blossom into like a million things, and it completely bombed, but you learned a lot of things from that that made you better in the future. And I bring this up because over the last couple weeks, I've had interactions with some people, and they have a lot of focus on failure, not being successful enough, not being good enough, and it's like, dude, everyone learns from life. Everybody needs other people. Everybody needs support. So, from your aspect, from a leadership perspective, what is something that you bombed on but you learned from and it made the next project you work on that much better?
You know, I would say more than anything, delegation. Delegation is so key, so foundational to being successful long term. Because if you're the one man band, if you're the jack of all trades and you're wearing five hats, and the good news is you've got tight control over the quality of the product. The bad news is it's all you. You can get burnt out really quick on that, and so that's a big. I try to recruit for leadership positions, but with volunteers in a nonprofit, it's difficult. A lot of folks have a lot of things going on in their lives and a lot of stuff going on their weekends. Um, but to bring in if I had a social media coordinator, to make my Facebook post for me, if I had recruiting retention coordinator to bring new folks in, keep folks engaged, um, and a handful of other positions, but it ultimately came down to me. So, I gave it my all, but I know in retrospect, had I had a more well flushed out team, that I may not have had things perfect to my standards, but I think that it would have been better for the organization as a whole.
No, that's an awesome point that you made about it's all you got the control, but it's not what's best for
Yeah,
the organization.
right.
And you've got to be able to pace yourself too, man, like you said. So we've got about 1 minute left here before we hit the one hour. Actually, we just hit the 1 hour mark, but we'll be okay. So I do want to kind of wrap it up with handing it over to you for about whatever you want to talk about. If you want to talk about the organizations you worked with or anything that you want to highlight, what is it that you want to tell people that's important to you in leadership?
Well, it's important to know yourself. It's important to know what your values are, but what your goals are, what your, really set your intentions and say, this is what's important to me. For me, it's being the best father I can be. That's my hobby, careers, goals, and intentions from here on out. Be the best father I can be. But for everybody, that's going to be slightly different. And it, in terms of leadership, you have to be passionate about what you're leading, why you're leading, what you have to be passionate about the end state, the goal. And so, I would say know yourself, find your passions, and then figure out how best you can serve. For me, it was putting all of my tools that the military put in my toolbox to good use in the community, and finding that balance. For me, I have this significant military background of, heavy combat and this, that, and the third. But I don't want that to be what defines me for my daughters. I want to have the balance of being somebody who's alleviated suffering, brought peace and harmony to my community. And so for me personally, I believe in balance and moderation. I've tried to instill that in my daughters. And so, you know, knowing myself, I'm not going to be content just being, on one side or the other. I want a good balance. And so, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a lot of credit to Homes for Our Troops, who totally changed the trajectory of my life and potential. Catch a Lift Fund, who have invested thousands of dollars, I imagine, over the years of hooking me up with gym memberships, because your physical health is foundational to your mental health. And they realize that, so they provide gym memberships and weight training for combat wounded veterans at no cost. And, in that regard, the Challenged Athletes Fund is helping me with running watch and shoes and a lot of other stuff to help me with this marathon. Because, I mean, I've ran, I don't know, more than 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, but a marathon is a whole nother animal. I tell you, I've never ran 13 miles and thought to myself, let's run back. It's pretty much, where's the wheelchair? I'm gonna fall into it now. Thank you for dragging me, literally in some cases, dragging me to the finish line. I'm gonna fall in this wheelchair now at 13 miles. So 26 is gonna be interesting. I've been giving it hell for about 4 years, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention awesome girlfriend, caregiver, Homes for Our Troops, The Mission Continues, Catch a Lift Fund, Challenged Athletes Fund, um, and Divers for Heroes. Thank you for scuba diving lessons.
That's awesome, man. And so I'm glad that you were able to link into those organizations and they were able to help you out. And then I'm also glad too that you were able to give back to the community as well. And it's like I said, it's incredibly impressive to see what you've done over the course of the years, and it's inspiring to me. Whenever I'm like, hey, getting a little bit irritated about something, I always go to your page and I'm like, dang, Bobby's eating dinner with the Puerto Rican governor or somebody. I was like, so and you're giving
Not
back.
not too many blue-eyed folks with the Puerto Rican marches, an honoree in the Puerto Rican parade, but they recognized that I was willing to do the work, regardless of um, petty tribalness that's kind of overcome a lot of us. Unfortunately, I just see, no matter what the demographic, if they're suffering, do what it takes to try and alleviate it, and try and gather as many allies in the process as you can.
Well, Bobby, I do want to thank you for coming on, this evening's show. For everyone out there who was watching and listening, I know it's been a while, but hey, people's lives, are forever in flux and changing, and things happen. And so I'm glad we were able to make this happen. So thank you, Bobby, for coming on and taking an hour and talking with us and sharing your story and how you're giving back, and also your views on principles and leadership as well.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
And for everybody else, I do want to end with this. So we've had two comments, but the whole goal and purpose of this show is really to generate a discussion about leadership and its principles, and from all different aspects. So like, yeah, military, have leadership principles that are great. Veterans have leadership principles are great. There's the also other nonprofit organizations that are out there. I talked to Dr. Nate Staten. He was a pastor. He showed his versions of leadership out there. So if you're out there and you have a leadership story you want to share and share your principles and challenges just to get it out there, because somebody else is going to encounter the same problems and the same challenges. And this is just to level the playing field and get information out there so people can learn from other real life people. So I'm Tim Staten, stating the obvious. Thank you for joining this show.